What's going on, guys? This is the Red Rogue, and I hope you're all doing well today. While closed alpha for Dragonflight has yet to be launched, Blizzard has had us all on a trickle feed of information, with various Dragonflight class talent trees coming out over the last few weeks. This week, with much anticipation, the Rogue trees were finally made public in their preliminary form, so I wanted to go over each spec and the class in general, including some ideas, opinions, and speculations on what synergies we might see. For our first foray into the Dragonflight talent trees, we'll be looking at the class-wide tree and some key highlights from each of the three spec-specific trees. I'm mainly looking at this from a PvE perspective, so I apologize to any PvP mains out there. It's just content I don't really partake in and haven't in a long time, and I don't want to go pushing out false information or inaccurate assumptions on that topic. Or look like a dingus, that too. I plan on doing some in-depth build discussion videos and potentially talking about this stuff on Twitch, as I recently got an account set up over there, so if you want to follow me, then the link should be in a pinned comment and on screen now if you're into that stuff. I'll still be making plenty of videos, but figured it might be fun to try streaming Rogue stuff a couple times a week, so we'll see how it goes. Possibly the largest fundamental change to the game for Dragonflight is the revamped talent tree, which brings in new options and questions people may have. A majority of the talent tree will be things our classes and specs already use, just split up into point nodes that we can select as we level up. Starting at level 10, you will gain 1 point in the class-wide tree, and then at 11, you will gain a point in your spec-specific tree. The process will alternate back and forth as you level, giving a total of 31 points on your class tree and 30 points in your spec tree. Keep in mind, this is all very preliminary pre-alpha stuff, so some of these talents and points and even the shape of the tree may change before you actually see it in live servers, but I hopefully at some point will get access to the preliminary stuff over the next coming months so I can share more information with you folks. All classes will retain some of their core abilities that will be learned just by leveling that character, which helps flesh out your full kit of abilities while giving an impressive array of possibilities for whatever type of build you're going for. Rogues will retain the following moves as part of their base kit: Ambush, Cheap Shot, Crimson Vial, Distract, Eviscerate, Kick, Picklock, Pickpocket, Instant Poison, Crippling Poison, Wound Poison, Shroud of Concealment, Sinister Strike, Slice and Dice, Sprint, Stealth, Vanish, and obviously most important of all, Safe Fall. Because you know you're just going to throw yourself off of any random ledge you see while speed leveling through Dragonflight, so this hopefully helps you die less often. Interestingly enough, Kidney Shot was not originally listed, however numerous talent choices mentioned it, and this was obviously an oversight on the article, whoever wrote it, and people were super happy that Rogues wouldn't have Kidney Shot anymore, and then they fixed the article and Kidney Shot is actually part of our base toolkit still. I can already hear the groans of sadness and disappointment from people tired of 7-second stuns in PvP, and honestly, it's a pretty pleasant melody to me. Now for our class-wide tree. This essentially just allows us to pick up a lot of the abilities we already have as rogues, though there is wiggle room because each half of the tree is a different spec, with Assassination being the left side of the tree, Subtlety being the far right side of the tree, and Outlaw's abilities being in the Goldilocks zone right in the middle. A lot of the higher talent points are basic crowd control and defensive effects, and depending on which spec you choose, you will start off with one of these abilities. Outlaw will start off with the Blind effect, Assassination will start off with its Garrote Bleed, and Subtlety starts with Sap. While it'd be really boring to explain every single talent option on this tree, I will go over what most of these options allow for, and especially the interesting ones. No matter what you want or don't want for your talents, you will need to spend a certain number of talent points to get past a couple thresholds in the tree. To be exact, you need to spend 8 points to get past row 4, and 20 points to get past row 7. This means, invariably, you'll be picking up quite a lot of our iconic crowd control abilities and defensives. As I mentioned earlier, the first row of talents are Garrote, Blind, and Sap, and depending on what spec you are, you have to take that no matter what. So Assassination gets Garrote, Outlaw, Blind, and Subtlety Sap. Since we'll be discussing what I generally think of the Rogue class-wide talent tree in this video, we'll start with how widespread the talent tree actually is. A lot of this comes down to the sheer amount of crowd control and defensive options that Rogues have at their disposal, and the tree blends a lot of things together that haven't been accessible across specs in either a very long time or basically ever. There are a number of abilities and effects that all three specs can now take advantage of, such as Gouge, the exceptionally strong, short cooldown incapacitation ability that is essentially an extra interrupt in a lot of situations. The extra range of acrobatic strikes is now a class-wide choice as well, giving Subtlety and Assassination that breathing room to avoid mechanics while still DPSing that Outlaw has enjoyed for multiple expansions. Leeching Poison, Assassination's exceptional self-healing talent, has also become a multi-spec option if you're willing to invest enough points to reach that part of the tree. This does affect how many of these cool effects you'll be able to use, because to reach something like Leeching Poison, you will have to go all the way down the left side of the Assassination part of the tree to reach this, as there is no way to connect it from side to side. It's only a vertical up and down type deal to reach new talents. Shadow Step is an iconic rogue ability, but in the last few expansions, only Assassination and Subtlety have been able to use it. That changes with Dragonflight, and now Outlaw can get access to this mobility cooldown, and Assassination has the option of talenting into a second charge of Shadow Step to help even out the mobility disparity between it and Subtlety. On top of all this extra mobility and attack range, rogues now have the option to talent into both Cheat Death and Elusiveness at the same time, which are currently mutually exclusive in Shadowlands. This means you can reduce all AoE damage by 40% and all non-AoE damage by 30% every time you pop Feint, and you get to keep your Get Out of Jail Free card with Cheat Death. Seriously, I don't think rogues will ever be more tanky than they're looking to be for Dragonflight, and it's just awesome. And this is just looking at the utility and the defensives. We haven't even gotten into the strong offensive effects that we can dip into from the 3 specs. For example, on the far left side of the talent tree near the end, we have Assassination's Seal Fate passive. This is a 2-point talent in Dragonflight, and it makes your combo point generators have a 50% chance or 100% chance to grant an extra combo point when they critically hit. This was one of the few things I was really hoping we'd get to take advantage of as both Outlaw and Subtlety, though it is pretty far into the Assassination talent tree and would require some heavy point investment to reach it, but it is something we might see as a stretch goal depending on the build. For that same row, but in the Outlaw section of things, we see the return of the Echoing Reprimand Covenant ability. Unfortunately, this is the base version of the move, and there is no longer a Mechanicos Effusive Anima Accelerator Soulbind trait to take advantage of that cooldown being reduced from hitting extra targets with it, so I don't imagine this being a very compelling choice. You can talent into a couple extra anima charged points by spending 2 talent points on Resounding Clarity right below it, but this still puts it at a disadvantage to the Shadowlands version, and we don't have our Invigorating Shadow Dust Legendary to help get the cooldown any lower either, at least as Outlaw or Assassination if you're crazy enough to play Kyrian Assassination. On the Subtlety tree, Shadow Dust did make it into Dragonflight, so it's possible that this might see some usage for them, especially since you can talent into 2 charges of Vanish for even more cooldown management. However, Outlaw is the one that really saw a big use of this because our cooldown reduction actually affected Vanish, so we got to use it way more often. Lastly, on the Subtlety side of the tree are a number of potentially good DPS gains. Find Weakness becomes a 2 talent point option, giving up to a 40% bypass of armor for 10 seconds when you use stealth abilities. Currently, stealth abilities means things like Shadow Strike and Cheap Shot, but will likely include Ambush for both Assassination and Outlaw since Shadow Strike is just a modified version of Ambush anyhow. Bypassing 40% of a target's armor sounds super amazingly OP for any situation at first, but there are a few caveats. For one thing, anything that isn't just physical damage already bypasses armor values. This means magic damage such as Shadow, Nature, Fire, Frost, etc., as well as bleeds. For Assassination, their damage profile is basically all nature damage from poisons and envenom, and bleeds such as Garrote, Rupture, Crimson Tempest, and all that sort of stuff. This realistically means only your auto attacks, Fan of Knives, Mutilate, and Ambush will benefit from this 40% armor bypass. Also, applying Find Weakness requires stealth moves, as I mentioned, and for Assassination that is only Ambush, which you frankly don't use that much unless you talent into Blindside, which is just a proc chance so it's not exactly reliable. Subtlety, of course, has a hefty amount of shadow damage, some bleed damage, a smidge of instant poison nature damage, but still a pretty solid chunk of physical damage in their kit. Shadow Strike, Auto Attacks, Eviscerate, Black Powder, and Backstab are all physical hits. And of course, Critical Shirk and Storm hits all apply Find Weakness if you talent into that, so you're able to spread the debuff very reliably just like we currently can in Shadowlands. The new Subtlety tree does seem to lean heavily into the shadow damage fantasy of the spec, as you have a lot of talents that actually make you do more shadow damage, which I'll cover in a separate video, but a respectable amount of your overall is still physical. That, and you need to take this anyhow because there's a second charge of Shadow Dance right behind it on the talent tree, which is a pretty mandatory choice anyhow. Outlaw, on the other hand, has only physical damage in its toolkit, outside of instant poison damage. Due to this, Outlaw will likely see the largest gain of the 3 specs from the Find Weakness passive. But of course, there is the caveat of using a stealth ability, of which Outlaw only has Ambush, and you can only use Vanish so many times to use this. Until you remember, I just said there's a charge of Shadow Dance directly below Find Weakness, meaning Outlaw can in fact apply Find Weakness very reliably to their main target. This is pretty awesome, and would give Outlaw a good chunk of improved single target DPS. Now, without actually testing this part, once Alpha or Beta comes out, I imagine this will only improve damage on your primary target while Blade Flurry is active, since the armor reduction would only affect that main target, and the flurry damage would still be reduced by armor. If that is how it works, then this will probably only be noteworthy for single target and wouldn't impact cleave too much. I still think you'd want to go down this path to reach Shadow Dance anyhow, since Outlaw has numerous talents that buff Ambush a lot, so getting to use that ability more consistently would be great. Hey guys, just had to edit this in here really quick, because I noticed something that was kind of important that I wanted to bring up. It looks like Shiv is going to be an assassination-only ability going into Dragonflight, because it is not on the standard rogue tree and it is only on assassination spec-specific tree. This in turn means Outlaw and Subtlety are going to lose the ability to remove enrage effects, and to apply extra powerful versions of their non-lethal poisons, and this is something that only Assassination is going to be able to do going into the future. Hopefully that changes, because we only just got the ability to do that literally this expansion, so it seems really weird to get rid of that all of a sudden, but I just wanted to let you all know that, and that I think it's kinda lame. Anyways, we'll get back to the video now. Now, I don't want to go too far into the spec-specific trees in this video since it will already be way longer than I want it to be, but there are 2 very important passives that will be added in Dragonflight that finally give rogues the ability to buff their group or help their raid directly. This is something I know a lot of us have been asking for basically since they took a lot of our things that buffed the group and put them in PvP, like how Tricks of the Trade would actually buff the damage of the person you apply it to, and Smoke Bomb being crazy strong for raid, and the Swift Blade's Cunning passive giving a melee attack speed increase. For Outlaw rogues, the passive effect Restless Crew will now apply a small portion of our cooldown reduction effect, Restless Blades, to the rest of our party. Instead of giving 1 second per combo point of cooldown reduction like it does for most of our abilities, it will instead give 0.2 seconds per combo point to a specific, major offensive cooldown of everyone in the same party as you. Yes, only your same party, meaning it only affects 4 other players in your raid. It will also only affect whatever Blizzard determines is that spec's major offensive ability. Without an official list of affected abilities, I can't say 100% for sure what the moves will be for each class, but Restless Crew will likely use the same affected move list as the Night Fae Priest Fae Guardian's cooldown, since it uses very similar wording to Restless Crew. This passive has the potential to be really great, or it could be completely trash depending on the situation. A lot of specs can just send their cooldowns whenever they want, so getting an extra usage or 2 out of them in a raid encounter could be very potent. Others, however, will end up holding their cooldowns to line up with multiple non-affected cooldowns regardless of how quickly that primary one comes back, so this just becomes a moot point. Extra cooldown usage also likely won't matter in fights where you need to hold things for a specific burn phase, unless this cooldown reduction allows your stuff to line up better specifically for that situation. So again, it's something that could either be really great or really crap. On top of all of this, you also have to consider if that cooldown reduction is even allowing someone to get an extra use of their primary ability in that fight in the first place. Someone like a Havoc Demon Hunter's Metamorphosis is a pretty lengthy 4-minute cooldown, so if you're on a boss that your group can kill in, say, 5.5 minutes, then the cooldown reduction could very well not help at all because it could just make Metamorphosis come up right when the fight ends. This makes the passive a bit confusing in unorganized groups, because really you'd want to put this on whoever can get extra uses of a meaningful cooldown into that boss for more damage depending on when and where you need the damage. This then brings about the whole stigma surrounding external buffs affecting individual player performance and raid logs, which people have been spatting about back and forth with things like Power Infusion All Expansion about how it ruins parsing and causes friction in groups and whatever. Frankly, and this is just a quote-unquote hot take or whatever of mine, but I think parsing and raid logs showing performance averages has done as much or more harm than it has done good for this weird competitive nature a lot of people have gotten into when you're literally on the same team as a group of other people trying to down a boss together and working together, unless you're all like secretly Rex Troy bots in disguise and solo all your raids, I guess. Otherwise, your parsing performance is always directly or even indirectly affected by your team. There's also a lot of folks that think you're going to start seeing groups stack 4 Outlaw Rogues in the same party to Giga Juice a Fire Mage or something ridiculous like that, which is just disingenuous at best and foolish at worst. There is no way that Blizzard is going to let this type of aura affect multiple players multiple times from multiple sources, and if it does when Alpha launches, it will be disabled immediately and is likely unintended. That'd be like having, I don't know, like having 4 Wind Fury totems to buff your Monk or your Rogue or something, and all 4 totems actually actively apply their own Wind Fury % chance and stack. That's just ridiculous. My personal guess is that if there are multiple rogues in the same party, the coding that they're going to put in is just going to pick whoever's the first rogue in the group and use them for the tracking of combo point expenditure. Seriously, I feel like people just say this stuff on social media or whatever to try and scare anyone that isn't a rogue into demanding for this passive effect to be removed, despite being one of the most interesting group buffs they've ever considered putting into the game. Hopefully, once open testing is out there, we can see exactly how Restless Crew will pan out, but on paper, to me, it sounds like a very interesting group effect that should stay in the game. Now that I've done my rant on Restless Crew, we'll talk about our second passive, and we'll switch over to the Assassination Rogue side of things. Very early in the Assassination talent tree, we have Atrophic Poison. This is a new non-lethal poison that will reduce the target's damage dealt by 3% for 10 seconds. Yep. Assassination basically is getting a backwards version of Devotion Aura, where instead of reducing a group's damage taken, we're just going to reduce the boss's damage instead. This is pretty huge, and it gets better since you can talent into Master Poisoner on the Rogue class-wide tree for an additional 20% boost to this, bringing that damage reduction up to 3.6%. This will also be affected by Shiv, though I haven't seen exactly where or what it'll do, since Shiv applies a concentrated version of your non-lethal poison, meaning it's likely that damage reduction will be even higher in those Shiv windows. Now, this all depends entirely on Blizzard allowing this poison to affect raid bosses, as things like Crippling Poison don't, which is also a non-lethal poison option. Unfortunately, this is also kind of a sucks to be assassination moment, because if you want to use your Shiv for a specific ability that hits really hard in the group, then it might cause you to have to hold it for longer than you really want to. But if it helps the group and you kill the boss faster, it's still kind of a win-win. It just kind of feels bad. Anyways, it is on wishful and hopium levels of thinking that this effect will apply to bosses, giving Assassination its own huge way of helping raid groups in progression. Now, this kinda leaves an odd man out, as you can probably guess: Subtlety. Unfortunately, at this point in Dragonflight stuff, it doesn't look like Subtlety is getting access to either of these potentially strong group utilities. This will hopefully change in the future before launch, as it's really unfortunate to once again have a spec left out of cool things that help their guild or their party do content. Maybe we'll see Atrophic Poison or Restless Crew moved or renamed to something on the standard rogue tree, because currently the closest equivalent that Subtlety received is that anyone inside of Shroud of Concealment moves 50% faster. Oh boy. Now, to be fair, that could be actually pretty useful in Mythic Plus, depending on if it's areas where you can't mount and you still need to skip things and move faster, but it honestly comes off as this wimpy, participation trophy for group utility compared to cooldown reduction for your party, or just flat out reducing enemy damage by almost 4% on average. There is even more to go over with this tree, including synergies with spec-specific stuff and other effects, but I figured that is something I'll talk about more when I do each spec individually, because this is already a way longer video than I planned on it being. I guess that's a good thing though, because it means there's just so much cool stuff to discuss for rogues looking at their Dragonflight talent tree for the first time, and I'm frankly pretty impressed with the options we have available to us. Rogue is definitely the triple DPS class that has the most in common between specs, so I was hoping we could get some good hybridization ideas from all this, and I think that is definitely going to be the case. Anyways, I hope this initial discussion of the Dragonflight Rogue talent tree was entertaining for you folks, and if so, please consider subscribing to the channel or following me over on Twitch. I plan on doing a lot of Rogue nonsense over there, and we'll probably end up discussing things with viewers too while I'm at it. If you have any questions right now though, then feel free to leave a comment and I'll do my best to answer all of them. As always, my appreciation and gratitude to all my viewers and especially my patrons, who all help make these Shiba Shenanigans possible. Thank you all so much for watching. This is the Red Rogue, and I'll see you guys around.